this beautiful? Turn to your right. Does he feel the same way? What about your buddy to the left? You probably all just discovered that your answers were different. They were subjective to you as an individual. Well, regardless of your answer, what you all have just done is judge the aesthetic value of this picture. Everyone may have a different opinion of this, and that is aesthetics. This brings us to our question: how can one judge aesthetic value?
Now, most of you may know that aesthetics is the artsy thing that painters use. But aesthetics isn't just drawing and painting. Aesthetics applies to dance, theater, film, music, literature, propaganda, poetry, and any other type of art you can think of. But let's define aesthetics further. Aesthetics is the study of beauty in art. We've covered what has potential to be art, but what makes art beautiful? It has been said that a great work of art is a perfect marriage of form and content. In order to evaluate beauty, one must first reference the form and content of the work. Content. The content is the central focus in an artist's work. For example, if a painter's intention is to promote communism, he or she may choose to paint the focal point red. Form. Now, form is the second part of beauty. It is the format in which the artist chooses to construct the piece in order to convey his or her message. This means the artist can be a choreographer, a playwright, a sculptor, etc. Content and form could also said to be the focus and format. If a piece of art has these, then it has aesthetic value. Now that we know what aesthetics is, we can get down to the meat of the question. How can one judge aesthetic value?
Now here are three philosophers that have attempted to judge aesthetics and put it in a definite place in society. You may have heard of them: Plato, Aristotle, and Immanuel Kant. Plato has advocated that art not only had no role, but was detrimental to society. His fundamental argument against art was that it relied too much on emotion rather than reason, causing individuals to lead less rational lives. He would later state that in his concept of an ideal society, art should be outlawed. Plato believed art had no actual content because he produced and believed in mimesis, the idea that the true content of art lies with the gods, and everything in this world is an inferior imitation. Therefore, in Plato's eyes, art is an imitation of the original, which is, once again, with the gods. By Plato's argument, art has no content and therefore has no aesthetic value.
A student of Plato, Aristotle, had a different view of aesthetics and of art as a whole. Unlike Plato, Aristotle believed that rather than art inciting emotion, it purges or cleanses individuals of emotion. This cleansing effect is referred to as catharsis. For example, my brother Jake went to go see the movie Titanic. When he got home, he told me that he had cried throughout the entire film, and reported that the long crying session had been for the better and made him feel right as rain. This is an example that supports Aristotle, who believes that the value of aesthetics is to release repressed emotions.
Immanuel Kant, a more modern philosopher, analyzed aesthetic value as well. He believed that in order to interpret aesthetic value, one needs to view art through a disinterested lens. In other words, in order to examine art, one must leave their personal emotions behind and examine art from a more universal perspective. For example, I do not enjoy Pablo Picasso's style of cubism. I personally detest his enigmatic representation of the world and his color palette. However, it would be incorrect for me to say that Picasso is not an artist, according to Kant. Under Kant's philosophy, one must look at the bigger picture. What are the merits of the piece? Has the artist used the principles of art? It is as if one must assess the skill that the artist has put into his or her work, and that is the aesthetic value. Furthermore, one can look if the art has influenced a culture or inspired an artistic movement. This is also an aesthetic value. Kant views aesthetic value as a disinterested analysis of the work, and as a way to evaluate the piece globally. Kant's point of view means that, as an individual, I cannot say Picasso is a terrible painter, because he is widely accepted as a good painter. I am still allowed to have my personal opinion, but I cannot artistically critique his paintings, simply because I don't care for them.
The next question you are probably asking is, how is this useful to me? How do these things relate to our areas of knowing? Well, aesthetic values are related to the areas of knowing most clearly in the arts, but also in history. Aesthetic is a key component of criteria known as the intention of the artist, which is one of the three components that define art. Because aesthetics define beauty, it is also included in the quality of work, which is also one of the three components that define art. Because aesthetic value is such an integral part of art, it is invariable that while partaking in art, such as watching a play or listening to music, one is judging aesthetic value whether you already know it or not. This is because author's intention and quality of work are made up of aesthetic value. By assigning value to these works, one is judging the aesthetic value of that work. Going back to the exercise at the beginning, each individual has a different value for aesthetics based on their individual biographies or experiences, emotions.
Conversely, there should be a universal and disinterested lens. In doing this, there is an elimination of personal bias, creating a unanimous outlook on the aesthetic value of a piece, which produces a more concrete perspective on the work. However, by examining this in a universal lens, there is the elimination of personal responses or interpretations, which is the third criteria of art, the audience's response. Being a Muslim, I don't like how artists portray Muhammad's profile due to its banning in Islamic culture. However, under Kant's argument, society would overlook my opinion.
Aesthetics may also represent a historical event. The famous painting Guernica is used to exemplify the Spanish people suffering through Picasso's eyes. However, if the painting had been created from a German perspective, the content might show heroism of the German Luftwaffe with minimal to no representation of the people suffering. Content represents the message of the artist, whereas the form enhances the content through emotion.
During this investigation process, we've come up with our own method of judging aesthetic value. While evaluating aesthetic value, it is impossible to exclude a response from the audience because the focus of art must be able to be interpreted by the audience. Otherwise, the artist's focus is lost on the audience, and without focus, a work is not art. Therefore, we disagree with Immanuel Kant, but that there should be a mediation of one's response with a global perspective. On the other hand, form should be evaluated intently and should be used to shape your own interpretation because of its vital role in propelling content. This allows the artist to use form to project their message to you and thus bring aesthetic value to their piece.